chapter 21st. We are beginning a new chapter today. It's the ladder of self-transcendence in the yoga of integral knowledge. And Sri Aurobindo is naturally following on to this chapter from the previous one, where he has introduced the notion of what he calls the lower triple Purusha. And in doing that, he's trying to answer the question of what constitutes the kind of ontological difference between our existence and a spiritual existence. A spiritual existence that can be experienced as being outside our existence. And this is talked about in a variety of ways. Sri Aurobindo here, he introduces it in terms of his own experience as two realities, one which is extra cosmic, in other words, it's outside the cosmos, and it is silent, unmanifest, and in a way, there is a gap between that and the experience that we are finding ourselves in, which is dynamic, cosmic, and varied. It's got multiplicity. It's the manifestation of multiplicity. So these two realities seem to be opposed to each other, and they arise particularly because our experience in the world is often one of imprisonment, which is that there are a variety of limits that we experience, and something in us wants to get out of those limits, and a radical escape from limits takes us to the unlimited, but the unlimited has no relationship with this world of limits. So that's the dilemma that he's addressing. And by and large, it has been supposed that there is no relationship, that there is a gap, and we are here to escape out to that reality, the transcendent reality. However, there are many schools that also experience a cosmic unity, that is, the whole cosmos as one reality. It can be experienced either as a kind of presence, which is in all things, everywhere, or as a kind of consciousness that is manifesting as all things. These are two sides. One is more like a cosmic Purusha, cosmic presence, and the other is a cosmic, what is called a cosmic Shakti, or the power of consciousness that is modulating itself into the multiplicity of the cosmos. So here we have the experience of the multiplicity, which is what we are experiencing all the time. And we have one kind of unity which seems to hold it all together. But within that, there is a multiplicity that seems to be manifesting, something that is just losing itself into time and space. And there is something outside it all, which is extra cosmic in that sense, transcendent. And Sri Aurobindo is trying to answer the question, is there a way to bridge these, or are we fated, as many of the traditions believe, to be in one or the other of these realities? They are all exclusive realities. Now, of course, there is an assumption in Vedanta that there is one reality. Of course, this is also not an assumption shared by all the spiritual schools, even in India. So, for example, the very way in which I presented it, it can be seen as a duality. There's something cosmic, there's something transcendent, and there's nothing between the two. That is the position of some schools, like Sankhya, for example. And then there is the notion that there is one reality, but that reality is something that obliterates everything else, and whatever we experienced as reality is then experienced to be untrue. So we've reduced our problem to a monism by subtracting one part and calling it unreal. So Sri Aurobindo is not entirely buying that story. So this is partly why he's getting into this whole notion of the ladder of self-transcendence, and even the chapter before that, because he's saying, if there is really one reality, if there is only one, that one must be continuous, and that one must be that which has become everything that we can call other to it. And what is that? Is that the case? And according to our experience, if we probe the archives of human experience by looking at, for example, texts of the past, experiences of others, do we come to any understanding that there is a continuity in these so-called differences? And to do that, Sri Aurobindo looks at some ideas that are behind certain texts. For example, in this case that we just covered, the lower triple Purusha, he begins by foregrounding the idea of the Taittiriya Upanishad, in which there is the notion that we can identify ourselves with discontinuous ranges of experience. We can identify ourselves with matter and know ourselves to be material beings, physical beings. And if there's other things in us, they are subordinated. They exist, but they're subordinated. We have a life existence, we have desires, we have creativity, we have a thirst for survival. And these kind of things are subordinated to our physical existence, as well as any mentality that we may have, so that we are predominantly physical beings. That can be one experience. And we can stretch that to a spiritual level. And that's part of what we just discussed about the cosmic being. The cosmic being itself can be divided, in other words, to a physical cosmos, which is largely what we call cosmos today, because of the reduction of reality by science to the physical cosmos. If you use the word cosmos around you, people will understand the physical cosmos made up of planets and constellations and what is called the universe. But this is not the notion of cosmos that has always existed. So we may exclude this cosmos of the physical. And actually, before that, we may become this cosmos not merely in the little bit of our own existence, physical existence, but we may actually, by meditating, by concentrating on matter, come to a sense of the ubiquity of matter. Matter is everywhere, and it is one matter. This realization is a monism of matter, a materialism that in the Taittiriya Upanishad is the first step of the meditations of Bhrigu, the figure in the third part of the Taittiriya Upanishad. He says, what is Brahman? In other words, what is reality, we could say. And his answer is, reality is matter. And by this, he's not a materialist in the sense that he's looking at pieces of matter and saying nothing else exists but matter. He is experiencing the one reality as matter, not just mentally, but in a kind of identity of consciousness as matter. Now, from there, since that is not a stopping point, where he goes to his father, he tells him, go back and meditate, and he experiences a monism of life, what one might call a animistic monism. There is life energy everywhere. Even in inanimate things, life is present. And in animate things, it's a principle that is active in matter as well as outside matter. This is the world of life. And he experiences it everywhere. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous, just like matter is. And he says that life indeed is reality, is Brahman. And his father asks him to go back. And then this time he comes back and says, no, there's something else. There is mind. Mind is everywhere. And by mind is everywhere, we mean there's an intelligent principle. There are ideas. Whatever we call matter and whatever we call life are expressions of ideas. And these ideas constitute a universal mind that we can intuit and then identify with, so that we seem to have that universal mind. And we can assert that reality is mind. But Bhrigu's father doesn't let him stop there. He pushes him on and says, go back again. And this time he comes back and says, knowledge, or he uses the word vijnana. And this is a key term in all the studies that we are doing for Sri Aurobindo. He uses the term vijnana. And Sri Aurobindo translates it variously. In his earlier writings, he translates it as knowledge with a capital K. So it's not just the mind, even a universal mind, ideas, but these ideas are the self-manifestation of a state of knowing, not various ideas that make up the world. But a state of knowing can produce ideas, can produce truths of self. So the state of knowing that he uses the word knowledge for in his early works, and interestingly, he uses the word gnosis for more and more, and particularly in the Life Divine. And he also equates to a term that he coins, which is supermind. So this is the next stage that Bhrigu experiences as Brahman, as reality itself. And then his father doesn't stop there either, and he says, go further yet. And then he experiences a state of pure bliss, but not a kind of bliss which is exclusive of all these things that we've talked about. It's a bliss. It's like the closest analogy in our experience is that of creative bliss. Because in creative bliss, there is idea, there is life, and there is form or matter. So it includes all these layers that have been experienced before, but transcends them. It's pure bliss, but within it is the birth of knowledge, of mind, of life, and of matter. So out of that state, he returns And then the rest of the Upanishad is revalidating and valorizing the lowest rung, matter. It says, and it is saying, now that you know this, don't forget, it is all present in matter. Glorify matter, because that is where we have to experience all this. It's not a reductive matter, but a creative matter that ultimately is a cosmic creative force that transcends everything and has given birth to everything. So this is the journey of Bhrigu. And in the previous chapter, Sri Aurobindo takes us through the first 3 steps because those have been developed in us. And he's relating it to the evolutionary emergence of these principles. There has been matter as a dead material universe from which we found the beginnings of life. A new principle emerged, and then into that or out of that, there emerged mind, which can think of, intuit the ideas that are behind the material living universe. But if we stop there, this is what the previous one says, that we can extricate ourselves from any one of these and become fully identified with any other of these. And if we raise ourselves, as he says, raise ourselves from the material to what he calls the vital, and then to what he calls the mental, there is a new understanding of the entire reality, including whatever one has emerged from in the past. Living matter is not the same as dead matter, and thinking matter or thinking life is not the same as life without intelligence. I mean, I'm not using the word intelligence in the sense of the full functioning of rationality, using the principle of intelligence, or the cogito, as the Western traditions call it, and buddhi, as Sri Aurobindo calls it. But it's interesting to note that this chapter now is going to sort of go beyond that and talk about the fact that there are other reaches. And I also draw your attention in relating that to the notion of the divided line by Plato in his Republic. So in Plato's Republic, he introduces a conversation between Socrates and Glaucon, where before that, they're talking about the sun. A lot of this is very Upanishadic. It's directly a streaming of Upanishadic knowledge into Greek terms. And there he's talking about what connects this world that we experience, which is first a world of senses and inferences, conjectures and inferences, to a world of faith, because there's an intuition at work, to a world of reason, where one can actually understand the laws of the universe, to a world of gnosis. We come back to that term, gnosis, Gnosis. And that is the 4th level of Platonic, of the divided line. The divided line has first a division between the visible or the sensible and the insensible. By insensible is meant that which cannot be sensed. So that which cannot be sensed but can be intuited, can be understood by reason, for example, is intelligent. The intelligent according to Plato, the world of intelligence. By intelligence, we can't see the ideas behind things, but we experience it all the time, and we can intuit it from experience. We can have faith in its existence. We can intuit it, and then we can exercise our reason, our rationality to understand it. But even there, we haven't really got to the root of it until we get to the principle of gnosis. In the principle of gnosis, we come into contact not with the how of things, but the why of things. See, it's a very interesting point in this study that we are conducting with Sri Aurobindo and the ladder of self-transcendence. For Sri Aurobindo, gnosis of Vijnana, in a sense like Plato, becomes the key term. And it's clear that this is not the reason. And it's not the reason for this very reason, that as Plato is trying to bring out, that the world of ideas that he's talking about is not some ideas that we can understand with our reason. It's a self-existent gnosis. And one has to climb there outside. And for Plato, it begins with memory. It begins with the hidden memory of our knowledge of something deep inside us that we've lost. So, we've talked about this before, and the philosopher Whitehead said that in a way, all of Western philosophy can be considered footnotes to Plato. And in a way, the modern age is a certain footnote to Plato. It's a footnote to Plato where exactly the entire trajectory of modernity is a seeking for the ideas that constitute the gnosis. But the ideas searched for by the three lower rungs of the divided line, by sensory conjecture, hypothesis building, by the utilization of reason, by a faith, by which the faith of science is that there are a few laws by which everything can be understood. And the utilization of reason to infer and deduce or induce those laws. However, what needs to be understood is that that entire enterprise is not an answer to the question, why is there this reality? It's an answer to the question, how is there this reality? It's a question, it's actually a technological answer. And this is the point that Heidegger is making. What we call science, and we say that science is the mother of technology, is actually an inverted relationship. Technology is the mother of science because intrinsic in science is a search for understanding how things have been put together. Not why is the cosmos here, but how is the cosmos here? This how question is the essence of technology. But it cannot give us the gnosis. It brings us to the third of the four lines or segments of the divided line. And in Sri Aurobindo's case also, it brings us to the third of the four, what we just call the lower triple Purusha. But the whole notion of the ladder of self-transcendence is that until and unless we realize that that's not what satisfies the central problem of the human and of reality itself, we will not be able to arrive at gnosis, at knowledge, and not at digging out the various ideas by which reality is made. So with that, I think we can, if there's any comments, questions, and then we can enter this new chapter. Keka.
Yeah, so I have a quick question that is, there's the difference between knowledge and gnosis, that is state of having the knowledge, kind of like, or becoming the knowledge. So that there, I was thinking of that word, I mean, the phrase in the Upanishad that knowing what all can be known, So there is a what. So that what, if we call knowledge, then is it possible to say that it's very significant that Sri Aurobindo puts Vijnana as the equivalent of knowledge will. So the gnosis and the knowledge, the thing that is in between is the will. Could that be same?
Yeah, completely. I totally agree with you there. That's why the Sri Aurobindo considers the supermind to be the creative organ of Satchidananda. It's not just the knowing organ, it's the creative organ, because it's knowledge and will at the same time. What it knows, it becomes. Its deployment of its self-knowledge in terms of real ideas are a manifestation in space and time, and immediately, instantaneously. So in a way, when we use the word instantaneous, it's a paradox. It's like saying that it already always exists. And it's like talking about the fact that this organ of knowledge knows itself as all the ways in which it can know itself, all its various truths of being, the truths of being, and it manifests these truths of being at infinite speed. In other words, it's always there, but it's traversing it all at once.
So I just felt that the very perception of that I know itself has a will to know.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Margaret.
Debashish, when you're distinguishing between how things are put together, not why the cosmos is here, and the how is the technological answer, is that also the mechanistic answer? Is there a relationship between the technology and the mechanistic? Is there any difference between those? Are they most often the same?
Yeah, they're most often the same, but a mechanistic answer or a causational or causative answer that is at the level of mind, that's what we can approach, and that's how we can approach reality. That we look for cause-effect conditions that can hierarchically reduce themselves to a single idea. But that idea, it's like saying that I've actually arrived at the know-how of the entire building.
But not the why.
Not the why. Yeah. It's the projective mechanism that I came to know, but not the why. For that, you need to become the knowledge which produced all these ideas.
And you're saying that Plato is the one that sort of framed us in a certain way, but modernity has kind of never kind of answered that or gone off in a different direction. And that's still, we're still grappling with that now.
Right, exactly. So it's like like Heidegger talks about this notion of the epistemological turn, the turn towards knowing, but knowing in a mental sense. How do we know? No, we don't know by being, what Sri Aurobindo calls knowledge by identity. We know by turning our organ of knowledge, which is the buddhi or the intelligent, upon the world. So once we do that, it's an epistemological turn from being to knowing. The two don't need to be separated. Knowing can be being. But to do that, one has to rise out of this. It cannot be done either at the level of the mind or at a lower level. It isn't that the epistemological turn is a mistake in history. It isn't that we were better off before. We've reached a certain point, but we will be mistaken if we think that this is the point we have tried to realize. We reach the third meditation of Brigu. And we cannot stop there. We can assert that there are a few laws by which we can explain all of matter, we can explain a lot of life, etc. As Foucault says, the more living things become, the less predictable they become. The more of a stretch it is, because something creative exists in life that cannot be fully reduced to causation. And that creative thing is the Purusha. And it can only be discovered at the level at which it is creating its own forms of self-knowledge and deploying them to create a universe. Keka.
Yeah, just remember that you once mentioned about Tantra. Yeah, yantra, mantra, tatha, tantra. So yatha tantra, sorry. That said, I'm wondering that if Plato's covered that mantra part, in the sense that the will part.
Good question. I think one of the difficulties that has arisen in the Western tradition is a paucity of fullness in understanding the will part, as you said. So I think from Plato onwards, there is too much of an attention to knowledge and less to will. See, that's why his problem is entirely presented in terms of knowledge. And then you have the Socratic dictum, know thyself. See? Now, that's not necessarily a knowledge using the mind. It's a knowledge by identity that they are referring to. But if you frame the question in terms of knowledge, it's easy to mistake it in terms of mind. And you can never tell whether that's what what's the scope of what he was saying, whether it was already reduced or whether it got reduced later. See, it's difficult to tell. And there are interpreters who will come later on and say, that no, he's talking about something higher. And then others who will say, no, he's talking about the mind. So we have different trajectories of interpretation as a result. It's not fully developed. That's why the gnosis and the gnosis, to approach the gnosis, you need a Gnostic speech. You cannot do it by a rational speech. And Plato is using a rational speech to talk about gnosis. This is one of the difficulties. The Upanishads get away by using a Gnostic speech. Janita.
So I was thinking of Nietzsche's will to power, and is that like, you know, a will using knowledge and then evolving and going forward towards gnosis? Yeah.
I would
And-
say yes. Again, Nietzsche is beginning to talk in a Gnostic way, so that's why the difficulty of that is that since it is not stated in a kind of a rational philosophical, development, exactly what he's saying remains a little cryptic. But yes, I would say that's exactly what his whole vision of the Superman is, that it is the will to power as a will to self-exceeding that takes us beyond the boundaries of who we are as human beings to a being of knowledge. And he sees it as a divine child. By the divine child, he means somebody who has the power of pure creativity without any preconditions. Poesis, as he says, poesis, the power of pure poesis. So to get to that, whether we think about that as the repository of knowledge, or we think about that as the repository of creative will, I think Nietzsche is bringing back that attention to that.
Yeah, so the Obermensch that he arrives at, the Oberman, right?
Yes.
It was kind of, and then I was just thinking about the play of the feminine in gnosis. To arrive at gnosis is the greater part played by the feminine. Maybe like we'll come to that a little later.
Yeah, I think it's a very important point, and that it connects with this notion of the Platonic discourse, which is really approaching through rationality and the mind and things like that.
Mm.
But in a way, one has to become receptive. To travel beyond, one needs to be receptive to. That's why he's saying the Shakti, the female power, the power that can illuminate us and bring us into itself. See, it cannot be done by dominating reality with our mind. See, so that's the part that's not so clear. Of course, in Plato also, he's saying that it's really by utilizing the deeper faculties of memory, of intuition, by connecting it to a receptivity, but it's unclear. And I think it's very true that at least in Sri Aurobindo, it becomes very clear that it is by opening to the feminine powers of becoming that we can connect with that which is above us, outside of our scope.
Right.
Sunki.
I just like to ask, Keka asked about the knowledge will in connection with gnosis, and my question is, so the will part can be said like you said the why, the Heidegger technology thing that gives us the how but not why. So when Keka said the knowledge and will as gnosis, that will part can be more closely connected to why, and the why as divine will, and the why as divine will, can there be a close connection too? And also, Janita mentioned the Nietzsche's divine child, the Nietzsche's will, at will. So can you give more comment on it? The will, the knowledge and will and why divine will and Nietzsche's will.
Yeah, so you see, when we are talking about will, we are actually acknowledging becoming. We are acknowledging time, right? Will is a will to manifestation, you see. And when we are talking about intelligence, we are talking about ideas at the level of the mind. We are talking in terms of something which stays outside. You can actually abstract it. We're talking about abstract ideas, see. And so if there is a knowledge which is abstract and which acts as if it can stand apart and see reality and create laws that can be applied at any time, it's really something that is not reality itself. It is something that is, kind of split off from reality. While reality has to be seen both as a being and a becoming. It's a self-becoming. Unless we go out of it, we have to see it as a power of knowledge that in its knowing is manifesting itself. Something that is creative, something that is subject and object at the same time. To be subject and to apply the organ of knowledge to oneself is to immediately manifest oneself as object. You see, this question of who and what come in. You see, who am I, right? And what am I? Who am I is the question of the subject. What am I is the objectification of that question. It becomes the object. And the exercise of questioning itself is the exercise of will. If no question arises, there is no manifestation and there is no will. So the very notion of asking that question is an act of knowledge. An act of knowledge which is a will. See, you know who you are, but you don't question who you are. You just are. There is no manifestation. But you ask, who am I? And immediately to your mind, all the images of who you are become real, and immediately they manifest. The infinite potential of the divine as reality manifest as the truths of being when it turns its knowledge will on itself. And that is cosmos. Yes, if there is no question, there is no manifestation.
It's not a question. I just love it. You said it, and I just love that.
Yeah.
No question arises. There's no
understand.
manifestation.
Yeah.
Devashish, am I
Yeah,
audible?
just a moment. I think Jean-Michel has his hand up for some time. So let's
Oh, sorry.
see what he has to say. Yes.
Yes, this week I was reading in Sri Ramakrishna's teachings something that seems quite relevant to our discussion here. He was saying that Maya itself, that everything, the entire cosmos, is actually Maya, but this Maya is also the Divine Mother. It's exactly, there is a relationship of identity. They are like two faces, but that are actually one. And that one could exactly, like Professor was saying, that the Shakti is this will to unite with the mother is going to shift the other face of this illusion. We are going to see the illusion as a divine power and not as a prison anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just wanted to share that. It's also connected with what
Yeah, very,
you were
very
saying
true, Jean-Michel. If you find that passage that you're talking about, maybe you can send it.
Yes,
and afterwards we can.
in French. It is Jean Herbert as records of some answers, but yes, I will do it.
Okay. Anastasia.
Yes, am I audible? Oh, okay. I have been thinking about soul recently, and I found that there is not only this element of this future-oriented element of becoming in it, but also a more eternal quality, a quality of which seemed to me to be actually the rather foremost present quality immanent in the soul, the quality of eternity. And it seemed to me that it is actually the most divine expression of the divine spark, which is the soul. And now when I listen to this, when you mentioned the importance of knowledge, I was wondering whether it is actually also knowledge which is present in the soul, and whether that is actually the real knowledge in the sense of the gnosis, which is there present, or where else is this gnosis actually located?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Anastasia. So, yeah, I would say psychic, I mean, the psychic reality, the psychic existence, psychic being is an aspect of the gnosis. But it is the gnosis that has accepted the face of Maya that Jean-Michel was talking about to manifest. In other words, it is gnosis that is an intuition covered over by the Maya. And the origin of the gnosis is the plane of gnosis, or the plane of supermind. That's the origin. So what you said, I really liked what you said, Anastasia, from the viewpoint of actually what the eternal and the becoming, because that exactly is the mental paradox that is the truth of the psychic being, as well as the truth of the supermind. See, it's the truth of the psychic being as an immanent divine entity in us, because when we are talking about becoming from our point of view is a movement in time. But becoming from the divine point of view is, as we are saying, when we are talking about knowledge will, is an experience of eternity and temporality at once. In other words, becoming from the point of view of the divine, and that is actually being the immanent knowledge of the psychic being is the same, is that whatever can be is an idea, not an idea that is abstract, but an idea, what Sri Aurobindo calls a real idea, that is eternally present, and at the same time that is experiencing itself as an unfoldment.
Yeah.
And for us, it's two different things. That's why even at the level of the psychic, there is a knowledge of time. In Sri Aurobindo is talking about the psychic being as temporal eternity. it is bound to its existence in time. It knows that it has never been born. It knows it will never die. That's its eternity. But it also knows that it will live forever from life to life. It's a manifesting power that will live forever from life to life. It's like a river without beginning and end. That's its temporal eternity. At the same time, it is never born, unborn, the unborn. That is its real idea. So to know itself as that which is eternal and that which is temporal simultaneously is the supramental state. And in a way, that is also in its own mode, the psychic state. Ika.
Yeah, sorry to
So
keep on asking.
when we juxtapose, sorry, can I just add on one question?
Oh,
When
okay,
we
okay.
juxtapose, sorry, juxtaposed soul and supermind, what is this now? Where is the soul? Where is the soul? Somewhere it does not. Is it a repository for what is possible or present in the supermind, or is the supermind already something which does not need anymore anything that is present in the soul? Is everything in the supermind once it will be fully? Is everything available there?
So, yes, but when we say yes, it's almost like saying that we are reducing again supermind to the terms of the mind. See,
Yeah.
when we
No,
say, is
don't mean
everything
that.
there? It is, we are actually spatializing supermind as if it's a there,
Mhm.
but there is no there. See,
Right.
you
We
see,
don't know what
you
it will
cannot
be.
spatialize supermind. That's why Sri Aurobindo has that beautiful line in the Isha Upanishad commentary about the things that are happening, having happened. He says, in supermind, it has already happened, but it has not happened in past time. It has happened in perpetual time. What is the meaning of perpetual time? That is the paradox that you have to experience. Until that point, we can ask these questions that you're asking, but we can never get the answer because we are using the terms. It's just the same thing that we're saying about the difference between the mind and the knowledge or the gnosis. You cannot ask this question until you have that experience of the difference between perpetual time and past time.
Thank you, Debashish.
Kika.
Yeah, I was thinking about exactly what you said. It's very relevant to that. I was thinking the psychic being, the way we can think of mind, the way of thought, right? Like we can think, and by thinking, we kind of follow the footsteps of mind in a way, right? But about psychic being, it just, you kind of get a shock. I mean, you don't really, I don't even understand how psychic being thinks or knows. I mean, psychic being itself is a kind of a state of knowledge or something of that sort, or certain state of being, which can exert its influence on other operations. But does it have a real, like a mind has a thought operation psychic being is like it can reveal itself, but can it know? I mean, that kind of operation, does it at all have? I mean, that is the, yeah, so.
Yeah, so I think, as you yourself said, its being is its knowledge. It's a different kind of being that includes knowledge. In other words, to experience the psychic being is to experience a state in which one knows already, you see. So it's knowing by being. One knows that one's eternity, one knows one's immortality, one knows these things, but it is not knowing either by conjecture or by thought or even by faith, but it is knowing by being. And therefore, the mode of knowledge of the psychic being is gnosis. Gnosis is the mode of knowing by psychic being. Yes, it knows by identification. That exactly is not only by, it knows by identity. It doesn't have to identify itself with anything. It knows by identity. It is the knowledge of its own eternity, its own immortality, etc. Not from the outside, but from the inside. You see? So it's a mode of knowledge. It's a mode of being that is knowledge itself. This is the reason why the Upanishads are using the term vidya and avidya. Vidya is called knowledge. And that knowledge is essentially a state of being from which, we can objectify knowledge. So when you're talking about, does psychic being have knowledge in the sense that we talk about knowledge of the mind? Psychic being has knowledge as a state of being, but it can extend itself to the forms of consciousness and influence them with the kind of consciousness that they know. In other words, it enters mind as thought, psychic intelligence. It enters the life force as psychic vitality. It enters the physical being as psychic materiality, etc. But that's not its essence. Just like the supermind is knowledge with a capital K, but it extends itself into other forms of existence and consciousness in which it becomes those things. Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Debashish. So what you just said in terms of perpetual time and past time, and when we speak about ideas and bringing in Plato, the method of reminiscence, but it does seem to me that like the idea of memory, it's a dualistic language, which kind of seems to be positioning the past as the past, where really when we're speaking about knowledge, it's almost the opposite, where it's like the psychic knowledge is, in one sense, could be said of you are remembering, or what you will become in a way. And so speaking about ideas, like the real idea as opposed to a Platonic idea, we have to break this linearity of time. And so I guess my question was more like, where did like the aleatory point, which would be from a certain perspective of that kind of opening through the mental kind of topology of time in a sense, but from supermind or from jnana, is there an aleatory point?
Supermind would be the aleatory point.
It is oh yeah.
If supermind would be the aleatory point, or anything outside. I mean, supermind itself is something, it's just a concept until you experience it. But in Sri Aurobindo's own case, what he thought was supermind ultimately turned out to be overmind. So it's really, philosophically, we can say supermind is the aleatory point. But long before we can get to the supermind, we experience what we are calling the aleatory point from beyond the mind, whether it is the higher mind or whatever. It's cosmic ranges of the mind that are absent to us now that start acting. And that's the aleatory point is the perpetual time. That is exactly that. That's why it is the aleatory point. It's really about the point of time where something is happening for the first time, yet it has always happened. It's the immediacy of time experience, which carries in itself immanent the notion of something that has always happened. The two are together. There's no way of separating them.
So then, in terms of
And you're
our
right,
experience,
just to complete the thought, that again is exactly where Platonic thought has not been explicit about things like that. So that's the reason why we are looking at it as a linearity of time. It's so easy to take the Platonic idea to be exactly this reminiscence of past time. And that's how he sees it, right? He sees it in terms of a reminiscence of past time. He's saying we had a birth, and from there we fell. See? So the image is immediately one of a happening that we have to return to by memory, right? Now, that memory is in another space. It isn't a space that is here and now. It is thought of as a linearity in past time. You see, it is true that so the Platonic notion of the fall, that we were there, we came here. This is the paradox of time experience by the lower triple Purusha, as Sri Aurobindo says. The lower triple Purusha experiences time as a linearity. But that's exactly where, if we're going to go back by anamnesis, back to a memory, which Isha Upanishad is saying the same thing, right? It ends with the lines, "Oh, will remember that which was done, remember." This is it's calling us to a remembrance in perpetual time, not in past time. That which was done is being done, will be done, here and now.
yeah, beautiful. In a sense, that fall, then, like, to bring in Deleuze, that could be the Sajura, which is really going to be the triple, I mean, the three senses of time. But that Sajura is a falling, a just disjointing of time itself.
Yeah.
It seems. Yeah. And just one last question. It was more about the idea. Also, I had something on my mind about the idea of novelty and creativity. The idea that aleatory point taking you to that, like the experimental posture, which really takes you to the experience of the new, but from a different kind of consciousness.
Yeah.
It's a different affective reality as well, which I mean, in a sense, if you kind of flipped the reminiscence, it's like you can do something radically experimental and creative, and yet there's a familiarity.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of, almost like a cognitive dissonance to our normal experience.
Exactly. And in a way, all creativity is like that.
Yeah.
The higher the creativity, the more creativity itself has the sense of a happening in perpetual time. That's why all creativity is a contact with the aleatory point. But it's still not sufficient. You know, we claim it for ourselves. To the extent that we can actually really live there on a permanent basis, we are rising out of the lower triple Purusha.
Yeah, thank you, Devashrishta.
Jean-Michel.
All right, so I feel that the obvious remains the problem, remains exactly the the theme of this chapter, which is the continuity that you were mentioning, because it is quite possible to move the point of consciousness in trance to different points in time, etc., going up, going back, going forward, including widening. But then this is like discontinuous to our daily physical existence, and it's quite incredible the little power we gain over the over this material existence, even while we can going into trances and things like that, and have this kind of realization. So I guess my question is how to bring the power of perpetual time into our daily experience, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's that is the question, because I think that's the question, the project, Sri Aurobindo's project, which is really preparation of the lower triple existence and receptivity to something beyond it. And that's also a preparation, because it's just like, in a sense, our mode of existence has to change, and to change it, we have to do it in a waking state. So just like you were saying, it's possible to enter into trance, to touch these states, also to touch states which are outside this. But like the mother says, that what the supermind brings is the coherence of space and time, because it already knows, it has already unfolded to itself while it is unfolding in time, everything. And so this coherence that we are experiencing can only be experienced in a waking existence. It cannot be experienced in a dream, not in swapna, but in jagrat. So that is the yoga. The yoga is the union of the shushupti, the jagrat, and the swapna and the jagrat, the turiya acting through that union. See?
But what do you think?
To do that, one has to prepare. It's a tremendous preparation. It's just like every level has to become more and more conscious and open itself to that ladder of transcendence, that really each level occupies the others, so to say.
Yeah, my question now is, I feel like I can save most of the souls. I don't know if I find the right words, but I feel that the souls that approach the states of bliss and of divine communion, divine love, why would they want to do that work, that immense work of somehow that is another burden? And well, most of divine beings didn't want to do that even, all right? So my question is, what kind of predisposition or motivation brings someone into this kind of immense revolutionary project?
I'd say, Jean-Michel, the predisposition is the fact that the divine has become us. There's something in us that, is missioned to realize integral reality. To wherever we stop. And there's a very interesting part where the mother says there are so many schools which are actually talking about them. She's talking about Buddhism there. She says, we can come to a point in our progress where we find a choice. You have a choice to escape into the transcendent.
Yeah.
But she's saying, as a matter of fact, 90% of those who reach that choice because they wanted it, choose actually to stay back and to bring some of that power into life. And why do they do that?
But generally it's to bring the other people up to that state.
Yeah. Why do they do that? Did they do that because like you're saying, the predisposition that's in us is not really ours. The whole
Yeah, no, but I guess that
yoga
I
is
understand.
not
I
to
quite
escape.
understand I quite understand this movement that is more the traditional yoga, which is, you know, to bring the souls back to the Satchitananda.
Yeah,
But to have this kind of will to transform matter.
yeah,
That's what I mean. And to just even abandon you know, the state of bliss, to, like the mother did, to just do something completely radical and new. To my mind is something mind-blowing. I don't know how to say it, just but I guess it's the will of the divine itself. That's it.
that's the point.
answer.
That's the point. I mean, in a way, whoever has done whatever has been always the will of the divine. You know, there are the precursors, the people who are needed to do what they do, so that somebody in the future can actually also realize it, right? And that line in Savitri, here to realize himself was God's desire. You know, so this is the whole thing, that, you know, that we carry in us the blueprint of self-realization, not as an escape, but as God's realization here. See?
Yes.
The divine to be realized here. I think we have another question from Penny that I'd like to address. So the Penny's question is, before I go to you, Sunki, does the term Maya Shakti relate to what you have been saying about Maya and mind, and possibly of creativity and will? Yes. So Maya Shakti, so Sri Aurobindo talks about two aspects to Maya. This is related to, in a way, what Jean-Michel was saying, that Maya can be a kind of a deluding consciousness. In other words, it pulls a veil on reality. And what we are experiencing is that veil. But Maya knows that it has put the veil. You see, it's Maya's act, creative act, to put the veil. It's not Maya's deluding act. It's Maya's creative act. We don't know that, so we feel that it is a delusion. But if we were to experience Maya Shakti, as you're saying, that the consciousness force of Maya, Maya as consciousness, if we were identified with that, we would experience this as a creative becoming of this cosmic being. So that's how, you know, we see Maya as a creative force, not as a creativity will, as you said, not as a deluding force that is keeping us away from truth.
Thank you.
Sunki.
Related to the memory we've been talking about, I just like to bring the passage, the ending passage of the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna's last saying is, he says, this is Sri Aurobindo's interpretation. Sri Aurobindo saying, "Destroyed is my delusion. I have regained the memory." I've been really wondering about what memory it is. It's really, very abstract and hard. Yeah. So he said, "I have regained the memory through your grace, O infallible one. I'm firm. Dispelled are my doubts. I will act according to your words." So memory here. That's my question.
It's that memory, exactly. It's that memory of the perpetual time. That's the memory he's talking about there. It's the memory of the memory of union, of yoga, of knowing the divine as already having achieved this war, and as immediately and at this moment achieving it.
So can you say here, Arjuna, somehow the long conversation with Krishna, he kind of successfully achieved a sort of a status, like a spiritual status, in which he joined the divine will and knowledge, and that state. Can you say that way?
Yes, you can absolutely say that. You can absolutely say that. Yeah.
And can you say, like, here we can maybe not the full stage of a supermind, but like a psychic being, although it's not before its kind of maturation, it has the touch with the supermind, as a
Yes,
psychic being can do it. Arjuna, although this state is maybe before the overmind, I don't know, before the overmind or absolutely before the supermind. Can you say here, Arjuna, kind of a taste some touch of a supermind? Can you say
yes,
that?
yes, absolutely. You can say that, because you see what is happening there in the Gita. I think the real crux of the Gita is the Vishwarupa Darshan. And that is a supramental vision. That is the
Oh.
time image. You see, that is the image of perpetual time.
Oh.
Yeah, where Krishna
Also-
is standing right there in the battlefield, he's a person in time and space, but he's also everybody, and he is all time, all at once. See, so this tremendous paradox, which can actually tear the mind cannot bear it, is given as a moment of grace to Arjuna. And he can't take it. So he says, stop it. I don't want this. I can't take it. Come back to, and they use the term, your four-handed form. So this four-handed form is not a reference to some kind of being with four hands. Sri Aurobindo is saying that's the cosmic form. And you use the word overmind. So it's like saying, Krishna is giving the supramental vision to Arjuna, but he's not ready for it. And he says, I want the overmental, which is really an opening to that, that time that we are talking about, the memory, the erasure of memory. That's why I was telling Jonathan, it isn't necessarily that we have to go to the supermind, but we become open to that. We become open to that, and it opens up a new yoga, one may say. And Arjuna is really, in that sense, a representative of humanity who is opening the doors to the yoga of the future, where we need to travel beyond the human. So
Yeah,
I
and-
totally agree with you, Sunki, that's exactly what's happening. He's opening to the possibility of supermind with this, that's the erasure of amnesia that he's talking about.
Can I ask you give more comment of what is a supramental? It's kind of shocking. You said that the Vishvarupa image is a supramental vision, and what is supramental in that vision? I'm wondering about.
Yeah, it's so supramental in that vision is I mean, it's totally spoken in paradoxes. It's infinity and one. It's formless and having all the possible forms that have ever existed. It's all the various paradoxes that you can think about in one form. So you don't have the luxury of saying God is formless. Or you'd say, I'm all the forms that exist, and I'm one form. See, all these paradoxes that the mind cannot actually look at except making opposites of them are all present at once, right there. That's the supramental state.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Janita.
I just wanted to make a comment that Francis Newton Sousa has painted the Vishwarupa. So it's like how shocking it was, and then it was not really digestible, and then how Arjuna says that. So in his own, he's kind of given a manifestation to this particular scene, and yeah, it's one of his very important paintings.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, he's engaging with that idea, and as far as his own ability to engage with it. Yes.
True. It was actually extension of all the head series that he did, and then he arrived at this, and he's given it a form. Yeah.
Nice. So I think today we've had a catch up, largely with many ideas. and we are close to the end of our class, so we can read a little bit. We can start our chapter and read maybe a couple of paragraphs, one or two paragraphs in this chapter, the transcendent. One paragraph, it's a long paragraph. So who would do this for us today? Jean-Michel, would you like to read? Do you have the text?
Yeah, okay. So this is the ladder of self-transcendence. The transcendence of this lower triple being and this lower triple word, to which ordinarily our consciousness and its powers and results are limited, a transcendence described by the Vedic seers as an exceeding or breaking beyond the two firmaments of heaven and earth, opens out a hierarchy of infinitudes to which the normal existence of man, even in its highest and widest flights, is still a stranger. Into that altitude, even to the lowest step of this hierarchy, it is difficult for him to rise. A separation, acute in practice through unreal in essence, divides the total being of man, the microcosm, as it divides also the word being, the macrocosm. Both have a higher and a lower hemisphere, the pararda and apararda of the ancient wisdom. The highest hemisphere is the perfect and eternal reign of the spirit, for there it manifests without cessation or diminution its infinities, deploys the unconcealed glories of its illimitable existence, its illimitable consciousness and knowledge, its illimitable force and power, its illimitable beatitude. The lower hemisphere belongs equally to the spirit, but here it is veiled closely, thickly, by its inferior self-expressions of limiting mind, confined life, and dividing body. The self in the lower hemisphere is shrouded in name and form. Its consciousness is broken up by the division between the internal and external, the individual and universal. Its vision and sense are turned outwards. Its force, limited by division of its consciousness, works in fetters. Its knowledge, will, power, delight, divided by this division, limited by this limitation, are open to the experience of their contrary or perverse forms, to ignorance, weakness, and suffering. We can indeed become aware of the true self of spirit in ourselves by turning our sense and vision inward. We can discover too the same self or spirit in the external world and its phenomena by plunging them there also inward through the veil of names and forms to that which dwells in these or else stands behind them. Our normal consciousness through this inward look may become by reflection aware of the infinite being, consciousness and delight of the self, and share in its passive or static infinity of these things. But we can only to a very limited extent share in its active or dynamic manifestation of knowledge, power, and joy. Even this static identity by reflection cannot ordinarily be even effected without a long and difficult effort and as the result of many lives of progressive self-development. For very firmly is our normal consciousness bound to the law of its lower hemisphere of being. To understand the possibility of transcending it all, we must restate in a practical formula the relations of the words which constitute the two hemispheres.
So what we see over here, Sri Aurobindo, moving on from the previous chapter, is introducing this notion of the two hemispheres, as he calls them. And the Sanskrit term he uses from the Upanishads a parardha and aparardha. Ardha means half. And parardha, para is higher, transcendent. And apara is the mundane, the non-transcendent, the mundane. So it's like saying it's the empirical half and the transcendental half. And in that sense, you can see immediately the relationship with the divided line, the empirical half and the invisible half, the transcendental half. But the laws of these two are different. And that's what he has discussed so far is the law of the empirical half. But there is another half, and he's saying that's difficult to reach. And then the point he's making is that even if we reach it, our experiences are bounded by a dividing power. This is why if you look at that, we can reconsider this paragraph because it's a very dense paragraph and the words he's using are very precise. And every one of those descriptions has got its own precision. And the repetition of the word dividing, the dividing power, which is really the power of the overmind, you see, which is a power to create divisions so that if you have this, that becomes the opposite. Whatever you put yourself in as a state of existence and affirmation has its own opposite that becomes non-experienced. You see, it becomes unreal in that sense. And that is one of the chief difficulties of this transition from the lower half to the higher half, or the transcendent half, as he calls it. And that's why he starts with that and says, let's talk about what are the laws that hold these two halves in themselves.
So then wouldn't you say that detachment plays a very important role to move away from the suffering and misery and that whole delusion which holds us in its grip? So as a first step, that you live in the world and you become detached.
Yeah, of course. You're very right, Janita. And as he pointed out, even in the last chapter, first to recognize the fact that there is this lower half from which we need to change the state of relations. And for that, there is a preparation needed. And sure, as you said, detachment is one of the first steps towards that, because otherwise we are caught in it. We think it to be real. See? So yes, indeed. So, okay, so I think we'll have a chance to get deeper into this in a couple of weeks. Are we meeting in a couple of weeks or?
So
Yeah, when is our next? Yeah, it's going to be the 1st, I think.
1st July.
1st of July. Yes.
will you still be in the USA then, or will you be in India then? Okay,
I'll be.
safe trip.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Wonderful group, everyone.
Wonderful.
Thank you for this precious session to all of you. Delicious.